My name is Norman Decker, and I turned 70 on a Sunday in October. My son stood up in front of 60 guests, put a glossy brochure in my hand, and said, "You've done enough, Dad." It was for a place called Willow Grove Commons. The move-in date was already clipped to the front cover. People applauded. My granddaughter cried into her napkin. I said thank you. I finished my cake. Then I drove home, took down a cookie tin that had been sitting on my kitchen cabinet for 19 years. The next morning, my son's billion-dollar company received a letter with my name on it. It wasn't a threat. It was 2 paragraphs long, and every word in it was true. That's what made it unsurvivable. Before I take you back, take a second to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now let me take you back to July 20th, the morning I fell in my own shop. The rung gave out at 6:40 in the morning. I was on the 3rd step of an aluminum ladder pulling the water pump off Ray Hedler's dump truck. 41 years I'd owned that ladder. It picked that Tuesday to quit. I came down on my left hand. I heard it before I felt it, which is how you know it's bad. I sat on the concrete a minute and looked at my wrist. It had a bend in it that God didn't put there. So I did what you do. I got a shop rag and a hose clamp off the bench, splinted it against a length of 1/2-inch conduit, and drove myself to Merrill County General. Stick shift. 1 hand. 26 minutes. The nurse asked me for an emergency contact. I gave her Grant's cell. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail, and a woman's recorded voice told me the mailbox belonged to the office of the chief executive. Grant showed up 4 hours later, charcoal suit, an assistant behind him carrying 2 phones. He looked at my arm, and his face went pale in a way I hadn't seen since he was 9 and put a nail through his foot. For about 3 seconds, he was my kid again. Then he set a blue folder on the bed tray. "Dad, while we've got you here," he said, "we should talk about some things." I've read enough parts diagrams to notice small print. There was a line along the bottom edge of that first page. A date stamp. It said the document had been generated on July 18th. I fell on the 20th. I didn't say anything about it. Not then. To explain why that folder bothered me, I have to go back further than my wrist. My father died in the spring of 1980. He left me a garage on 4th Street, a lift that leaked, and $60,000 in debt. I was 25. Carol was 6 months pregnant with Grant. A lawyer in Zanesville told me to file bankruptcy. He said nobody would blame me. He was probably right. I didn't do it. I ran the garage days and pulled the 11 to 7 maintenance shift at the Bell Hollow paper mill nights. 14 years. I got good at sleeping in 90-minute pieces. Carol used to leave a plate in the oven with a dish towel over it, and I'd eat standing at the counter at 7 in the morning, while she got Grant ready for school. The last payment cleared in March of 1994. I still have the receipt. I have all of them, actually. Carol kept a Danish cookie tin on top of the kitchen cabinet, the blue one with the windmill on the lid. Every receipt, every deed, every warranty, every green certified mail card sorted by year with a rubber band around each bundle. When she got sick, she made me promise to keep doing it her way. So I did. Every May, I still take 1 envelope out of that tin and use it, 19 years running now. In 1983, I bought 22 acres out on Route 9 at a county tax sale. An old grain elevator lot, all weeds and busted concrete. $4,100. I wanted somewhere to park equipment. Carol asked me once what all of it had cost me. "Then I'll tell him nothing," I said. "That's the whole point." She didn't argue, but she wrote the date on the tin lid anyway. Grant came to me in 2006. He was 25, same age I'd been when my father died. He had 2 leased reefer trucks and a customer list on a legal pad. He asked if he could put a gravel yard on the Route 9 property. We did it right. We sat in Hal Faraday's office on Court Street and signed a ground lease. 20 years. $1 a year. Notarized witness filed downstairs at the Merrill County Recorder's office the same afternoon. Nothing about it was a secret. Half the men at Pike's Diner watched us pour the first slab. That gravel yard is Terminal 1 now. 340,000 square feet of cold storage. 400 people badge in there every morning. I've been told it moves 61% of the company's Midwest volume, though I never went looking for that number. Dale Frawley told me over pie. 2 years ago, after a funding round, they changed the name. Decker Freight Services became Meridian Cold Chain. New logo, blue and gray letters that lean forward like they're in a hurry. Holly showed me the ceremony on her phone. They had a crane lift the old sign down off the wall. It took 11 seconds. Nobody called to tell me it was happening. Danielle explained it to me later at Easter while she carved. The old name tested poorly, Norman, she said. Nothing personal. Markets are markets. I said that was fine. I meant it mostly. I did drive out one night and get the old sign, though. 12 feet of painted steel. I've got it standing on edge behind the air compressor in my shop where it doesn't bother anybody. A name on a building doesn't hold a roof up. A deed does. They came to the house that evening. My wrist was in a cast up past the elbow, and I was working out how to open a can of soup. Danielle spread the folder across Carol's kitchen table like she was dealing cards. Durable power of attorney, healthcare proxy, and a third document stapled separately titled Property Consolidation Summary. It's just for convenience, Dad, she said. She always called me Dad in that voice, the one she used on investors. In case you're laid up longer than we think. I read slowly. I've always read slowly. In my trade, a decimal point in the wrong place costs you an engine. Page 1 gave a stranger the right to sign my name on anything financial with no end date on it. Page 2 covered medical. Page 3 was different. Page 3 described a parcel by number. 041-22. Route 9. I looked up. Why is my land in a medical form? I said. Danielle blinked, twice fast. That's boilerplate, she said. It's an attachment, I said. Boilerplate doesn't have a parcel number. Grant leaned back and rubbed his face with both hands the way he does before a hard conversation with a vendor. Dad, don't read it like that, he said. You're not a lawyer. No, I said. I'm the owner. I squared the pages up with my good hand and pushed the folder back across the table. I'll read it, I said. I won't sign anything I haven't read. Danielle smiled and said, of course, take all the time you need. Then she put her hands under the table. I watched the glow of a phone screen come up under her chin while she typed. She wasn't texting Grant. He was sitting right there. 3 days later, my granddaughter drove me to my follow-up. Holly's 16. She'd been learning stick that summer on my 1998 F-250, the burgundy one with the toolbox in the bed. Car rode in that passenger seat for 26 years. There's still a worn spot on the door panel where she'd rest her elbow. Holly stalled it twice at the light on Marion and apologized both times. Don't apologize to a truck, I said. It can't hear you. She laughed so hard she stalled it a third time. We got back to the house around 2. The gravel spot beside the porch was empty. There was an oil stain on the concrete shaped exactly like the truck that used to sit over it. Front to back, a perfect outline. My phone buzzed, a text from Grant. Sold the truck. You can't drive one-handed anyway. Frees up the driveway for medical transport. Holly read it over my shoulder. She started to cry before I did. Grandpa, she said, that was Grandma's seat. It still is, sweetheart, I said. It's just somewhere else now. I did not call him. I want to be honest with you about why. It wasn't dignity. I was afraid of what my voice would do. I went inside instead and got the leather notebook at the junk drawer. I wrote the date, the time, in one line. Vehicle sold without authorization. That's a habit from the shop. When a machine fails, you log the failure before you fix anything. Otherwise, you're guessing. I didn't know yet that I was building a record. I thought I was just keeping my hands busy. By the time I filled the second page, the power was out at my shop, August 5th. I got to the shop at 7, and the overhead door wouldn't lift. I thought it was the opener. It wasn't. There was nothing live in the building. No lights, no compressor. No hum in the walls that I'd been hearing since 1981. The utility woman on the phone was polite about it. That account was closed at the account holder's request, she said. I'm the account holder, I said. Sir, billing was transferred to a Columbus address in April. April. 3 months before I fell. Danielle had rolled my utilities into what she called consolidated family accounting, and I'd signed a change form in the spring without understanding what it did. I opened the shop refrigerator. It smelled like a mistake. There was a plastic container on the middle shelf. The last lunch Carol ever packed me, February of 2024. I never could bring myself to throw it out, and I never once opened it. I'd just look at the lid sometimes. It had gone warm. I carried it to the dumpster behind the building and stood there a while before I let go. Dale Frawley found me out back. He's 55 now. I hired him at 19 when he couldn't identify a torque wrench. He handed me a coffee from Pike's and looked at the gravel. "Norm," he said, "I've got to tell you something ugly." Corporate had issued a directive. Mr. Decker Sr. was no longer permitted on the loading dock. Insurance reasons. "They've got the buyer's people combing every document out there," Dale said. "Every lease, every easement." I set my coffee down. "What buyer?" I said. Dale didn't answer. He looked at his boots, and that told me plenty. "Dale," I said, "I'm not asking you to lie for me. Just don't lie to me. I told you every May I take an envelope out of that tin. Here's what that is. When Hal Faraday drew up the ground lease in 2006, he sat me down and said something I never forgot. He said contracts don't fail because people are crooked. They fail because everybody assumes somebody else is watching the calendar. So he gave me a job. Once a year in May, I type a one-page letter on Carol's old Smith Corona. Same letter, new date. It lists the term of the lease, the deadlines in it, and what happens if a deadline passes. I mail it certified to the company's office, and I file the green receipt card in the tin. I have done that 19 times. Faraday's been dead since 2017, and I still do it because Carol told me decent people give warning. Decent people don't ambush. The 2025 letter went out on the 5th of May. The green card came back on the 9th. I've got it in front of me now if you want to know what was on it. A signature in blue ballpoint. D. Decker. The letter said what it said every year. The lease ran 20 years from January 1st, 2006. There was one option to extend it another 10. To use that option, the company had to send me written notice no later than 180 days before the term ended. That put the deadline on July 4th, 2025. If no notice came, the lease expired on December 31st. I banded the green card into the 2025 bundle and put the lid back on the tin. I never gave it another thought. My son has a legal department. He has a whole floor of them. July 4th came and went. I grilled a hot dog by myself and watched the fireworks go up over the terminal roof. I had no idea what had just expired. Danielle called on a Thursday and asked me to lunch. She said she felt terrible about the truck. She said she wanted to start over. I put on a clean shirt. She drove past the turnoff for the Olive Garden in Cambridge. 10 more minutes and we came up a landscape drive with a fountain in the middle of it. Brick colonial, white columns, a banner over the entrance. Willow Grove Commons, assisted living and memory care. "We're just going to look," Danielle said. "There's a lunch buffet. It's free." The woman at the front desk stood up before we reached her. "Mr. Decker," she said, warm as pie, "we've been looking forward to this." She had a name tag that said Bethany. She walked us through a dining hall, a courtyard, a room with 11 recliners facing a television. She told me they carry a men's slipper in size 11 wide. Nobody had asked me my shoe size that year. Nobody but the hospital. The tour ran 50 minutes. At the end, Bethany sat down at her desk and clicked something, and a printout came out of the machine on the credenza behind her. I read it upside down while she stapled it. I've been reading work orders upside down across a counter my whole life. Decker N. Anticipated move-in Q4 2025. Deposit received. Room 118, Garden View. Down in the corner in 6-point type, the file creation date. June 12th, 2025. I sat very still. June 12th, 6 weeks before my ladder broke. Whatever I broke in that shop, it wasn't what started this. This had been running a long time before I hit the floor. Danielle looked over at me and smiled. "Everyone here is so happy, Norman," she said. "Wouldn't you like that?" Holly found it looking for her rollerblades. She was in the closet, in her own house, in her own hallway, and she pulled down a shoebox that had a rubber band around it. She thought it was photographs. She drove it to me that night in her mother's Lexus, and she didn't stop crying the whole time she carried it up my steps. 31 envelopes. every one of them addressed to Norman W. Decker, 118 Ridge Road, Bell Hollow, Ohio, every one of them unopened. I sat at Carol's table and went through them with a box cutter, one-handed slow. County Treasurer, real estate tax statement second half, 2 notices from farmers and merchants about a dormant savings account, a card from the church about the anniversary of Carol's death, a fat envelope from a firm in Chicago called Callaway Harbor Partners that I set aside because my hands had started to shake, and underneath all of it a windowed envelope with the seal of the Merrow County Probate Court. I opened that one last. In the matter of the guardianship of Norman W. Decker, an allegedly incapacitated adult. Filed September 12th. It was the 22nd of September when I read it. The notice said any objection had to be filed within 30 days of service. 9 days left. Holly was standing behind my chair with both hands on my shoulders. She's a tall kid. She held on hard. "Grandpa," she said, "what does incapacitated mean?" I read my own name and that word sitting next to each other on a court document with a case number over it. I had to set the letter down on the table and look at my hands for a second to be sure they were still mine. There were 4 pages of concerns. Concern 1. The respondent failed to pay a utility bill resulting in service disconnection at his place of business. That was the shop. The bill went to Columbus. Danielle sent it there in April. Concern 2. The respondent has been observed addressing his granddaughter by his deceased wife's name. I did that once. It was the second Christmas without Carol, and Holly was standing at the stove in her grandmother's apron, and for half a second my whole chest went sideways. Holly hugged me. She thought it was sweet. Somebody in that room had written it down. Concern 3. The respondent sustained a fall consistent with age-related cognitive decline. A ladder rung sheared off. I have the rung. Concern 4. The respondent has demonstrated resistance to reasonable family assistance regarding asset management. That one at least was accurate. I read the signature block 3 times. Petitioner Grant W. Decker, son. Prepared by Wesley T. Trammell, Esquire, Counsel. Supporting affidavit of fact Danielle M. Decker. The relief they asked for was plain enough once you got past the language. A guardian of the estate would be authorized to execute instruments on my behalf. Deeds, leases, conveyances of real property. I turned to the last page, the schedule of assets requiring protection. There was one line on it. Parcel 041-22, Route 9, Bell Hollow Township, 22.4 acres. Not the house, not the shop, not the savings account at Farmers and Merchants. One line. They didn't want me safe. They wanted my signature, and they'd found a way to take it without asking me for it. I called Ruth Ann Pike at 10:30 at night and asked her if she still knew a lawyer. Ellis Boyd keeps an office over the dry cleaner on Court Street. 58, 12 years, a county prosecutor before that. He drinks his coffee out of a mug that says Fenwick Auto Parts on the side. Ruth Ann drove me. She waited downstairs so I wouldn't feel supervised. Boyd read the petition twice without making a sound. Then he set it down and asked me 3 questions. Did you drive yourself to the hospital? Yes. Who's paid the taxes on that parcel since 1983? I have. Never late. Do you keep your paperwork? I put the cookie tin on his desk. He didn't laugh. He took the lid off like it was a file drawer. He went through the bundles until he found 2006 and pulled out the ground lease. I watched him read the extension clause. His eyes went back to the top and read it again. Then he found the 2025 bundle. The green card was on top. Ellis Boyd set his coffee down very slowly, the way you set something down when you don't trust your hand. "Mr. Decker," he said, "did anybody ever send you written notice exercising that option?" "Nobody sent me anything." "Not a letter? Not an email? Nothing your attorney received?" "My attorney died in 2017, I said. "Everything comes to my mailbox." Boyd looked at the shoebox of unopened mail on the corner of his desk. "Then as of July 5th, he said, your son's company has been a month-to-month tenant on the most valuable dirt in this county." I sat in that chair a full minute. I wasn't triumphant. I want to be clear about that because people always assume the opposite. I felt sick. Because right then I understood exactly why somebody needed me declared incompetent. I want to stop right here for a second because this is the part I still turn over at night. The answer had been in a cookie tin the whole time. I never looked at it as a weapon. It was a receipt. If you're the kind of person who keeps their paperwork the way an old man keeps his tools, go ahead and hit subscribe. You and I would get along fine. And tell me down in the comments, what's the one document you held onto that everybody else forgot about? Now, back to that office on Court Street. Boyd laid out 3 roads. 1. We sue. Abusive process, conversion of the truck, elder financial exploitation. It'll take 2 years and it'll be ugly in the paper. 2. We send a termination notice this afternoon. You'd blow that company's transaction to pieces before dinner. He watched me while he said the second one. I think he was testing my temperature. 3, I said. 3, we do 2 small things. We object to the guardianship, and from here forward you answer every written question anybody asks you, truthfully, in writing. That's all? That's all, Boyd said. Truth's slower. It doesn't miss. I looked out his window at the awning over the dry cleaner. I raised him, I said. Whatever's rotten in that boy, some of it came from my house. I'm not going to ambush my own son. Boyd nodded. But I'm not going to lie for him either, I said. Not to a court, not to anybody. Then we do 3. He filed the objection that afternoon, along with a motion for an independent medical evaluation. He wrote out a letter for me to sign, directing that all my mail be redirected to a post office box under my own name. At the door, he stopped me. One more thing, he said. A transaction that size, the buyer's counsel sends a estoppel request to every landlord. Standard practice. Have you gotten one? I stood there in the hallway over the dry cleaner and thought about a fat envelope from Chicago I'd set aside because my hands were shaking. It was still in my coat pocket. It had been in my coat pocket for 4 days. I opened it in the truck, Ruth Ann's truck. Mine was in Zanesville by then. 2 documents inside. The first was a cover letter on heavy paper from Callaway Harbor Partners. It was signed by a woman named Margaret Kilbride, general counsel. It explained politely that her firm had entered into a purchase agreement to acquire Meridian Cold Chain for $1.4 billion, and that the transaction was subject to customary conditions, including confirmed long-term control of the Bell Hollow distribution facility. The second was a form, 2 pages. It was called a tenant estoppel certificate, addressed to the landlord of record. There were 4 blank boxes on the second page: commencement date of lease, expiration date of current term, renewal options remaining if any defaults or disputes known to landlord, response requested by October 15th. I read it 3 times sitting in Ruth Ann's driveway with the engine off. $1.4 billion, and the whole thing came down to 4 blank boxes on a form that a paralegal in Chicago had mailed to a 70-year-old man in Bell Hollow, Ohio, because that's what the checklist said to do. 4 boxes. Nothing to invent, nothing to prove, just dates. Dates I had in a tin on my kitchen cabinet. Ruth Ann came out with 2 glasses of iced tea and found me still sitting there. Well, she said. It's a form, I said. You going to fill it out? I folded it back into the envelope and put it in the tin when I got home. Under the lid on top of the 2025 bundle. I didn't fill it out, not that week. I want you to understand that I had it for 22 days before I wrote a single word on it. I'll tell you why. Dale Frawley asked me to breakfast at Pike's on a Saturday. He wouldn't order, that's how I knew. Norm, I need you to hear a number, he said. 406. That's your head count. That's my head count. 90 of those people got hired in the last 18 months, on the strength of this sale going through. He turned his coffee cup around on the saucer. If the deal dies, Callaway walks and the bank facility gets repriced. Then somebody in Columbus draws a line through the least profitable terminal in the network. That's not you, I said. You move 61%. We move 61% because we've got the building. Take the building out of it, and we're a gravel lot in a county with 9,000 people in it. I looked out the window at the parking lot. 40 of those 406 came up through my shop. I taught Deacon Hollis to gap a plug. I wrote a recommendation letter for the Purcell twins on the back of an invoice. Ruth Ann refilled us both and didn't say anything, which for her is a sacrifice. I'm not asking you to lay down, Dale said. I know what they did to you. Half the doc knows. Then what are you asking? Nothing. I'm telling you the price tag because nobody else in your family will. He got up and put a 10 on the table for coffee he never drank. At the door, he turned around. One more thing, Norm. They've already ordered the plaque for the Founders' Day Gala. What plaque? Brass, Dale said. 4 foot. It's got your name on it. I went home and sat in the dark until about 2 in the morning, and I did not touch that tin. Grant called me for the first time in 3 weeks on October 2nd. He led with warmth. He's good at that. 20 years of investor calls will teach anybody a bedside manner. Dad, Founders' Day, November 8th, out at the terminal. I know when Founders' Day is. We're cutting the ribbon on the expansion. Board's coming, buyers are coming, the high school band's playing. A pause timed. And we're unveiling something for you, a plaque, bronze, in honor of the man who started it all. I sat down on the arm of Carol's chair. That's kind, I said. So here's the thing. His voice changed gears. You don't have to speak. I've got the remarks handled. You sit with Holly, front section, and when I say your name, you just stand up and wave. Stand up and wave. Right. Easy day. Another pause. And before that, I'm going to send Marcy out with some paperwork for you. Just clean up. Signatures. I looked at the ceiling for a second. Grant, I said, let me ask you something. Sure. You filed papers with the court saying I can't manage my own affairs. Silence on the line. And now you'd like my signature on documents? I said. Do those two things fit together in your head? He exhaled through his nose. I've heard that sound my whole life. It means he's decided the other person is being difficult. Dad, don't make this big. I'll come to your party, son, I said. I'll even wear a tie. Good, thank you. But I won't sign anything I haven't read. And I won't say anything at that microphone that isn't true. He said sure, absolutely, and hung up inside of 4 seconds. That was the moment I understood something about my son. He wasn't ashamed of what he'd done to me. He was inconvenienced by it. The court's doctor came out to the house on October 6th. Geriatrician from the hospital in Cambridge. Dr. Ann Meacham, gray braid, no jewelry, a clipboard. She never once looked down at. 90 minutes. She gave me the standard screen. First, serial 7s, 3 words at 5 minutes, draw the clock, name, the date, and the county and the president. I got all of it. She said the words were apple, table, penny, and I gave them back to her 20 minutes later while she was packing up. Unprompted, because it annoyed me that she'd asked. Then she got curious and stayed another half hour. She asked what I used to do. I told her about calibrating an injection pump on a Cummins, the whole sequence, timing marks and delivery valve and all of it. She asked me about my taxes. I walked her through the depreciation schedule on the shop building, line by line. At the door, she stopped. Mr. Decker, who moved your mail? I told her. She wrote for a while. The report came back. 4 pages. The finding was 1 sentence. No evidence of cognitive impairment, mild or otherwise. But she'd added a paragraph at the end, under a heading called Collateral Observations. Mail redirected to a third party without the patient's understanding. Utility service terminated by a party other than the account holder. Titled, Personal Property Sold Without Documented Authorization. She recommended the court consider whether the petition itself warranted a referral. Under Ohio practice, a copy of that report goes to every counsel of record, which means that on the afternoon of October 9th, in a glass office in Columbus, Wesley Trammell sat down and read 4 pages about elder financial exploitation, with his own name on the certificate of service. He stopped returning my son's calls 2 days later. She came at 9 at night on October 10th. No Grant. She parked at the curb instead of the driveway. She cried first. 3 minutes by the clock on the stove. Nobody is hurting more than me in this, she said. Nobody. I made her tea because that's what Carol would have done. Then she took 2 things out of her bag and set them on the table. A check for $250,000 and a quitclaim deed tabbed and highlighted transferring parcel 041-22 to Meridian Cold Chain. This is generous, she said. This is above appraisal. It's 1/5 of appraisal, I said. Dale told me what the county valued it at. She kept her hands flat on the table. I asked her one question. I had been carrying it around since Boyd opened the tin. You signed for my letter in May, I said. Did you give it to Grant? She didn't answer. Danielle, did he ever see it? Her jaw moved, nothing came out, and I watched the whole shape of it turn over in front of me like a truck rolling in slow motion. My son didn't know. He had never known. He'd spent 4 months believing his father was slipping because the person who kept his calendar had let a deadline die on a $100 million asset and needed somebody else to be the problem. She hadn't been protecting Grant from me, she'd been hiding from him, and I was the wall she picked. "If you just do the right thing," she said, "nobody has to know any of it." I stood up and opened the door for her. "Take the check off my wife's table, Danielle," I said. "She wiped it every night for 41 years. Sunday, October 12th. 60 people in my son's backyard in Cambridge. Caterers, a tent with sides on it because the wind had turned, a cake shaped like a combination wrench, which I'll admit got me a little. I wore the tie Carol picked out in 1994. Ruth Ann sat on my left, Holly sat on my right and held my sleeve.
Grant tapped a glass with a fork at about 6:15.
"My father," he said, "is the most stubborn man in the state of Ohio." Laughter. Warm laughter. Somebody's kid ran through the tent. "You worked 2 jobs, so I never went without. He gave me the ground I built this company on, and today we want to give him what he's earned." Danielle handed him something. He walked around the table and put it in my hands. Glossy trifold, a fountain on the cover. Willow Grove Commons Assisted Living and Memory Care. Clipped to the front a printed card. Room 118. Move in December 1st. "You've done enough, Dad," my son said. And 60 people applauded. That's the part nobody believes when I tell it. They clapped. Neighbors I've known since Carter was president stood up and clapped with their hands over their heads. Ruth Ann pushed her chair back so hard it went over in the grass, and she walked out of that tent and did not come back. Holly put both hands over her face. Danielle was standing at the corner of the tent with her phone up filming. I stood. I looked at that brochure. Then I looked at my son. "Thank you," I said. I sat down and I ate my entire piece of cake, and I told Mrs. Purcell the frosting was very good. 60 people saw a tired old man accept his fate. What they actually watched was a man deciding to stop protecting somebody. I went home, I got the tin down off the cabinet, and I filled in 4 blank boxes. Monday morning, October 13th, 5 after 8, Ellis Boyd's office over the dry cleaner. He put on his glasses and we went through it line by line. Commencement date January 1st, 2006. Expiration of current term December 31st, 2025. Renewal options remaining none. The option expired unexercised on July 4th, 2025. Known defaults or disputes none. Tenant currently holding on a month-to-month basis. 4 boxes, nothing invented, nothing shaded. Then Boyd typed the second document while I watched. A letter to the officers of Meridian Cold Chain, 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph stated the facts above and confirmed the term would end December 31st. The second paragraph was mine. I made him put it in over his own objection. It said that the landlord was prepared in good faith to enter a new 10-year lease at fair market rent, as determined by an independent appraiser of the tenant's choosing, or, alternatively, to sell the parcel at appraised value. It said all further communication should be directed to council. We enclosed one exhibit, a photocopy of a green certified mail card from May 9th, signed in blue ballpoint. Boyd read it back and looked at me over the glasses. "Anything you want to add? Anything about how they treated you?" "No," I said. "The truth doesn't need decoration." He signed as counsel. I signed my own name left-handed because the right one had started shaking, and I wanted it legible. Certified return receipt requested. Out the slot at the post office on Marion Street at 8:47 in the morning. It hit their mailroom in Columbus at 10:52 the next day. By 11:15, a company nobody could trade shares in had lost the only thing it was actually being bought for. He called 41 times. I counted them later off the log. Boyd had told me plain, no phone calls, no kitchen table meetings, everything in writing, so I let it ring. I have never done anything harder in my life than let that phone ring. He came out to the shop on the 30th of October, rain coming sideways off Route 9, no coat, no tie. I had the overhead door up and a work light on, an extension cord because the power was back on by then in my own name. "Dad," he said. First time in 4 years he'd led with that word instead of a sentence. Then it went the way those things go. He was angry first. He said I was burning down 400 jobs to make a point. He said Carol would be ashamed. Then he bargained. 2 million wired Monday and a seat on the board. Then he got to the last room in the house. You understand, Holly's a minor, he said. I decide who she spends her weekends with. The rain filled up the quiet. You can have the land, son, I said, at the price a stranger would pay. Dad, what you can't have is me, for free, forever. I walked over and pulled the chain and brought the overhead door down between us. I watched his headlights sit in my lot for a long time before they moved. He'd stopped on the way out, though. I saw him in the side mirror of the light. He stood in front of that 12 feet of painted steel behind the air compressor, the old sign, and he put his hand flat on the D. He still didn't know about the May letter. His wife had 19 days to tell him. She spent them booking a flight. November 8th, Terminal 1. They ran green carpet across the loading apron, right over the paint stripes with 24 dock doors standing behind the podium like a jury. 200 chairs. Board members in the first 2 rows, 6 people from Callaway Harbor in the third. Behind a rope line at the back, 406 employees in company jackets because attendance was on the clock. A reporter and a photographer from the Merrow County Ledger. The Bell Hollow High brass band in maroon, holding their horns against their chests in the cold. I wore my wedding suit. It's a 1979 suit, and it still buttons. Carol's tie. They put me in row 4 on a metal folding chair. Holly sat beside me in a coat that wasn't warm enough and wouldn't let go of my arm. There was an empty chair on my other side. They'd set out one too many. Nobody took it the whole afternoon. Beside the podium stood the plaque on an easel 4 feet of brass under a white cloth, and the cloth kept snapping in the wind like something trying to get loose. Under all of it, the compressors. You can't shut those down for a ribbon cutting. 340,000 square feet of cold, running at 34 degrees, humming through the concrete into the soles of your shoes. Danielle worked the front rows in a red coat, bringing Callaway people cups of cider. The woman with her was about 50, dark coat, no cider. She kept glancing at her phone, not scrolling, checking. At 2:40 she stopped, said something short to Danielle, and walked all the way down the center aisle to the back. She didn't come to me. She stopped at row 4 and asked my granddaughter where her grandfather was sitting. Grant took the podium at 3. He thanked the board. He thanked the county. He announced that Meridian Cold Chain had entered into a definitive agreement to be acquired for $1.4 billion, and the front rows came up out of their chairs. Then he put a hand on the podium and let his voice go soft. And I want you all to know my father is finally going to rest. He moves into Willow Grove next month, where he's earned every single day of it. Applause. 400 people at the back clapping because the people in front were clapping. Margaret Kilbride walked up the steps and asked for the microphone. She was pleasant about it, that's what I remember. No edge in her at all. Before anyone cuts a ribbon, she said, I'd like one item confirmed on the record. Grant smiled and gave her the mic. He had no reason not to. Mr. Decker, could you tell the room who currently holds title to the ground we're standing on and what the lease term is? My company has controlled this ground since 2006, Grant said. That's the answer I had too, she said, until Thursday. She unfolded a paper and read 2 lines off it. Expiration of current term, December 31st, 2025. Renewal options remaining, none. I have never heard 300 people go quiet at once. It's not silence, it's a sound. Ellis Boyd stood up in row 6 and handed her a photocopy. She looked at it and read the signature out loud. Certified mail received, May 9th, signed for by D. Decker. Grant turned his head, not toward me, toward his wife standing at the end of row 3 with a cup of cider going cold in her hand. Dad, his voice came off the speakers cracked open. Tell them it's a mistake. I stood up. It took me a while. Metal folding chairs in 70 years don't cooperate. Holly tried to come with me, and I patted her hand and left her in row 4. I walked up the center aisle with my left wrist still in a brace and nothing in my hands. No folder, no notes. The band director moved his stand so I could get up the steps. I put my mouth close to the microphone, the way you do when you've never used one. Everything the lady read is true, I said. I mailed that reminder in May, same as I've mailed it every May for 19 years. Somebody in the back row said something and got shushed. I'm not taking anything from anybody. This land is for lease or for sale at whatever a stranger would pay for it. starting Monday through my attorney. I turned and looked at the easel. And I won't be needing the brochure. I pulled the cloth off the plaque. 4 feet of brass, my name across the top in raised letters, and under it, a line about the man who started it all. I read it. Standing there in front of everybody, I read my own name on a wall ornament for a building I'd been banned from in August.
Then I laid the cloth back over it. Careful the way you cover an engine you're not finished with. I came down the steps. I took my granddaughter's hand. We walked out across that green carpet and through the rope line, and 400 people in company jackets stepped back to let us by. Behind us, the band started their first note. It died about halfway out. Here's what happened over the next 11 days. Every bit of it is in the record somewhere. Callaway Harbor did not walk. They repriced. 1.4 billion became 1.06. They put 85 million into escrow against the land question and pushed the signing out 120 days. The board opened a governance review on a Tuesday morning. Danielle was suspended inside of 48 hours and resigned before the week was out with an 18-month non-compete she'd written herself. Wesley Trammell moved to withdraw as counsel in the guardianship. The Ohio bar opened a file on him about what a lawyer owes a court when he drafts a petition on somebody else's say-so. And on the 14th of November, the board moved my son from chief executive to non-executive chairman. They named an interim from the Chicago office. They also promoted Dale Frawley to regional chief operating officer, which is the only part of that whole month I'd call good news. Margaret Kilbride called me herself, not through Boyd. She apologized for that first. I have a father in Wisconsin, she said. He's 81. He still won't let me change his oil. Then he's doing all right, I said. She was quiet a second. Mr. Decker, we'd prefer to negotiate this directly with you. That's unusual, isn't it? It is, she said. You're the only person in this transaction who told us the truth the first time we asked. I sat down on the arm of Carol's chair after that call and didn't get up for a while. Nobody had said anything like that to me since 1994, when a clerk at Farmers and Merchants stamped a loan paid and told me she'd never seen it done that way before. November 21st. Merrill County Probate Court, second floor, radiator knocking. Grant had new counsel by then, a young man from Columbus who kept touching his own cufflinks. He rose and moved to withdraw the petition. Judge Verna Holloman has been on that bench 19 years. She did not simply grant it. Before I do that, counsel, I'm going to read some things into the record. She read Dr. Meacham's finding, no cognitive impairment, mild or otherwise. She read the 4 concerns from the petition. Then she read one at a time the mail forwarding order signed in April, the utility disconnect request from the same office, and the title transfer on a 1998 Ford registered to Norman W. Decker. The young lawyer stopped touching his cufflinks. Petitioner is present, she said. Grant stood up in the second row. He looked smaller in that room than he had on the podium. Mr. Decker, I'm granting the withdrawal. I'm also entering a reprimand on this record, and I'm referring this file to County Adult Protective Services for review. You may sit down. Then she looked at me. Sir, is there anything you'd like to say? I hadn't planned on anything. I want you to know that. Your Honor, I said, I'd just like to drive my own truck again. They sold it in August. The room went still. The radiator knocked twice. Judge Holloman took her glasses off. Mr. Decker, this court finds you entirely capable, she said. It also finds that an embarrassing thing to have to write down. 4 minutes, start to finish. My son sat in that second row with his head down and did not look up when I walked past him. I put my hand on his shoulder anyway. I don't know why. I just did. Danielle came to my house on the Sunday after Thanksgiving to pick up Holly. She didn't come in. She stood on the walk with her keys in her hand and the car running. Holly put her coat on. Then she stopped at the bottom of my steps and didn't move. Mom, she said, I want to ask you one thing. Sweetheart, it's cold. Did you know in May? Danielle's face did something I'd never seen it do. It stopped performing. Did you know and let them say Grandpa was crazy anyway? You're a child, Danielle said. You don't understand what was at stake. I'm 16. Holly's voice went up and cracked, and she kept going anyway. Grandpa taught me to drive stick. I stalled that truck 9 times in one afternoon. He never once made me feel stupid for not knowing something.
I stayed in the doorway with a coffee pot in my hand. I could have said a dozen things. Every one of them would have taken that moment away from my granddaughter, and it was hers. So I poured myself another cup and let it be quiet. Holly got in the car. Danielle stood there a few seconds longer, looking at the porch light. When she opened the driver's door, the dome light came on, and I saw what was on the passenger seat. A folder. Resumes printed on that heavy cream paper people use when they're frightened. She's 41 years old. In 4 weeks, she lost her job, her name in the industry, and the only argument she had left with her own daughter. I stood in my doorway and felt sorry for her. That surprised me more than anything else that happened that fall. December 6 in the morning, my shop. I open early. Everybody in this town knows that. Grant's car came up the gravel with the headlights off, out of some idea of politeness. He had 2 coffees from Pike's. Mine, the way I take it. He got that right. No tie. He hadn't shaved. "I've got an offer," he said.
All right. 4 million for the parcel. Clean. Wired the same day. He set the cup down. And I want you on the board. Real seat. Voting. No, I said. Dad, that's above. I'm not taking your money, Grant. Sit down and I'll tell you what I will take. He sat on the fender of the Hedler truck, which he used to do when he was 12. 1. Fair market value set by an appraiser your buyer picks. Lease of purchase, their choice, not mine. Fine. 2. I keep 3 acres off the north end, the old shop and the original cutout to Route 9. That stays mine. Done. 3. For the next 2 years, anything about business goes through Ellis Boyd. You don't come to my kitchen with a folder ever again. He nodded at the floor. And 4, I said, this one isn't in any contract. He looked up. You call me on Sundays, not because I'm an asset, because I'm your father. If you can't do it, that's an answer too, and I'll live with it. My son put his face in his hands, there in my shop, and he made a sound I hadn't heard out of him since Carol's funeral. I didn't hug him. I'm not built that way, and neither is he. I took a clean shop rag off the bench and put it in his hands. We signed in March. 10-year lease, 3-party appraiser out of Columbus that Callaway picked, and I never spoke to. $41,000 a month for 22 acres of weeds I bought for $4,100 in 1983. I had to sit down when Boyd read me the number. The acquisition closed at $1.09 billion. 406 people kept their badges. Dale Frawley runs Terminal 1 out of the office that used to be the driver's break room. I took the first year of rent and put it in a fund at Farmers and Merchants. 12 scholarships a year, diesel technology and HVAC. Any kid coming out of a Merrill County high school who wants a trade instead of a debt. I named it after my wife, the Carol Decker Trades Fund. My name isn't on it anywhere and I'd like it to stay that way. Danielle took a job managing operations for a small carrier outside Dayton. I hear she's good at it. I expect she is. Grant kept the chairman's seat. He goes to 2 meetings a month and he has to raise his hand like everybody else. And in April, I drove to Zanesville with Ruth Ann and bought my truck back. The fellow who had it was named Pete Sowerby, a roofer, decent man. He'd put new plugs in it and cleaned the bed. He asked $900 more than my son had sold it to him for, and he apologized for asking. I paid it without a word. I didn't haggle and I didn't explain. Some things you just pay for. Carol's elbow spot is still on that door panel. I checked before I ever turned the key. He didn't call for 7 weeks. I won't pretend that was easy. Every Sunday I did the same things I always do, and around 4 in the afternoon I'd find a reason to be near the phone. Week 8 it rang. We talked about the weather for 4 minutes. Cold snap coming down out of Michigan. He asked if I'd wrapped the outside spigot. I said I had. That was the whole call. I sat there afterward feeling like a man who'd been handed something breakable. Week 11 he drove out. He had a toolbox in the trunk, brand new, still had the tag on the handle. The front end on the Volvo's making a noise, he said. I looked it up. I think it's a wheel bearing. It probably is. He stood there in my lot in a quarter-zip pullover, 44 years old, chief executive of nothing anymore. Would you show me how? 44 years. He'd never once asked me to teach him anything. Not once since he was 14, and decided the shop was something to escape. I went to the bench and got the 15mm and put it in his hand. We had that hub apart by noon.
He got grease up past his elbow and didn't complain. He asked good questions. In June, Holly passed her road test on the first try. She drove the F-250 in slow circles around the shop lot afterward, with me in the passenger seat. Carol's seat. Am I doing it right, Grandpa? You haven't stalled once, I said. Don't get cocky. Here's the thing I finally understood that summer. I was never afraid of Willow Grove Commons. It's a clean building with kind people in it. I was afraid my son would remember me as a line item. It's summer now, 2026. I open the shop 3 days a week and I don't take paying work anymore. I teach 6 kids on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays. 3 of them belong to men and women who badge in at Terminal 1 every morning. They're not allowed to touch a ladder on my property. That's Rule 1, and they think it's a joke. The brass plaque is still bolted to the wall out at the terminal. Dale has somebody polish it every Friday. He told me that like he was confessing. But that isn't the picture I want to leave you with. Back in May, I took a quart of white exterior enamel and a 2-inch brush out to the north line of my 3 acres, where the old fence post stands at the cut that goes out to Route 9. That post has been in the ground since 1984. I set it myself. I got up on a bucket, not a ladder, and I painted 6 letters on the crossboard by hand. Decker. No logo, no blue and gray, no lettering that leans forward like it's late for something. My left wrist has never been quite right since that July, and you can see it in the K. The bottom leg goes off at an angle. I stood back in the weeds and looked at it a long time. Straight enough. My son put $1 billion company on this ground. I just wanted my name back on a fence post. Turns out that's all a name was ever supposed to be. So let me leave you with a real choice, and I mean it as a real one. If you were me at that birthday party, would you have said thank you and gone home to your paperwork? Or would you have said what you were actually thinking, right there in front of 60 people? Tell me which one and why down in the comments. I read them. And if this one stayed with you, there are more waiting in the description. I picked out the ones I'd want to hear next. Take care of your people, and keep your receipts.